بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والحمد لله رب العالمين ولا إله إلا الله والله أكبر. الحضور الكريم، الأساتذة الكرام، شيوخ المدارس الصوفية المحترمون، الدكتور عزيز الكويتي، اللجنة المنظمة لهذا المؤتمر العلمي، السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. أحييكم تحية إسلامية من مدينة الكيب تاون، راس رجاء صالح. جئت من أقصى جنوب إفريقيا إلى أقصى شمال إفريقيا، وبالذات مدينة فاس، العاصمة علمية للمملكة المغربية. أنا الأستاذ ياسين علي محمد من جامعة ويسترن كيب. ورقتي ستقدم بالإنجليزية، أما عنوانه فهو المبادئ الصوفية التربوية الثلاث في فكرة أبي حامد الغزالي. أتمنى الاستفادة للجميع. My paper in English, The Three Principles of Sufi Education in Al-Ghazali. The principles of Sufi education has been extrapolated from mainly two of Al-Ghazali's works, the Mizan al-Amal, the scale of action, and Ayy wal-Walad, letter to a disciple. The Mizan al-Amal is a less known work, at least in English, but it is an important ethical treatise which deals with Sufi ethics and education, and was written in Baghdad before Al-Ghazali's departure and conversion to Sufism. It deals with the explication of Sufism and its practice. Al-Ghazali refers to the Mizan in his Mi'yar al-Ilm, Criterion of Knowledge, a book on logic, and he refers to the Mi'yar several times in the Mizan. This is an internal indication that the Mizan is an authentic work of Al-Ghazali, contrary to the opinion of the Orientalist Montgomery Watt. Now, there are three principles of Sufi education in the thought of Al-Ghazali. The first principle is the balance between knowledge and action. In the Mizan, Al-Ghazali explains that happiness and salvation come about by both knowledge and action, and that religious scholars, Sufis and philosophers have all agreed upon this. Moreover, they agree that knowledge is nobler than action. However, knowledge is not enough, but must be followed by action, not merely outward action, but also action accompanied by inner sincerity. Al-Ghazali was worried that his actions are not guided by sincerity of intention, but by his search for worldly fame. This led to his spiritual and psychological crisis, after which he sought the advice of the Sufi Sheikh. The Sufi Sheikh advised him to practice asceticism, zuhd, which is complete detachment from the world. This, in my opinion, prompted him to leave his prestigious position as professor of Nizamiya University and to depart from Baghdad, where he went in search for 11 years to find himself. And he states, and I quote from the Mizan al-Amal, my English translation, "But when I truly wanted to follow this path of Sufism and continue to recite the Quran, I consulted a senior Sufi who prevented me from that, Mana'ani. And he said, the way to detach yourself from the material world to such an extent that your heart does not turn even to family, wealth, country, knowledge and power. You should get to the point where these things, whether you have them or not, are a matter of indifference to you. Then only can you sit alone in a corner, Zawiya, and devote yourself to prescribed and voluntary acts of worship. Your heart should be empty, even of study, or free of all attachments, caring only for the remembrance of God. Unquote. It appears that the Shaykh discouraged him from reciting the Quran. But we must understand that this does not mean mere reciting for blessings, but the actual study of it. And the Shaykh knew that this would distract the philosophical-minded Al-Ghazali. The Shaykh knew that the only way for Al-Ghazali to overcome his psychological, spiritual depression was to make a fundamental sacrifice. This involved the practice of asceticism, including giving up his position and leaving the city of Baghdad. Al-Ghazali needed to empty his heart of all vices and prepare it only for Allah. But on the other hand, action alone is not enough for the seeker of the spiritual path, as they need to be grounded in the intellectual sciences. If they want to attain the goal of the intuitive knowledge of God, ma'rifah, Al-Ghazali cautions that if the Sufi does not equip himself with knowledge of the true sciences, he would go astray and will struggle to liberate himself of stray imaginary thoughts. And I quote, "And if the soul is not pleased with the true sciences, it will acquire distracting imaginary thoughts, khawatir, which deems to be realities of descending upon the soul, but actually they are not realities. How many a Sufi who struggles for 10 years to rid himself of one distracting imaginary thought, but had he mastered the true sciences, al-ulum al-haqiqiyya, first he could have got rid of it effortlessly." So the preoccupation of acquiring the sciences by knowing the criterion of knowledge, that is the mi'yar of ilm, and attaining the proofs of the detailed sciences is to give it priority. Unquote. Now these true sciences are the rational sciences. The fact that the passage refers to the mi'yar, a book on logic, implies that for Al-Ghazali, philosophy which bases itself on demonstrative logic is essential grounding for the Sufi seeker. But the real sciences are not limited to philosophy, but also theology, kalam, the principles of jurisprudence, usul al-fiqh. This knowledge should be the first step, followed by action. However, unlike the Mizan, where he stresses the importance of rationality and the intellectual sciences, in his Ayyul Walad, it is only given the status of Farad Kifaya knowledge, and more importance is given to the understanding of the self, fiqh al-nafs. Al-Ghazali appears to disparage the intellectual sciences, but we should understand him in proper context. In one passage, he says that the rational disciplines, including law, theology, principles of jurisprudence, and ethics, are inadequate as compared to the knowledge of worship and the adoration of Allah. If you read or study knowledge, your knowledge must improve your heart and purge, I'm quoting here actually. If you read or study knowledge, your knowledge must improve your heart and purge your ego, as you learn that your life would only last another week. Inevitably, you would not spend it in learning about law, ethics, jurisprudence, scholastic theology, and the like. And I presume that includes philosophy. Because you know that these sciences will be inadequate for you. Instead, you will occupy yourself with inspecting your heart, discerning the features of your personality, giving worldly attachments to a wide berth, purging yourself of ugly traits, and you will occupy yourself in adoring Allah, the exalted, worshipping Him, and acquiring good qualities. And not a day or night passes for any worshipper without his death during it being a possibility. Unquote. At first glance, the passage gives the impression that Al-Ghazali is disparaging the theological, ethical, and legal sciences. But when we understand the context of the passage, we realize that this is not really the case. Al-Ghazali is responding to a disciple or disciples who want to prepare themselves for the grave. These senior scholars who have acquired enough knowledge of the sciences but need to prepare for the hereafter through self-purification. This is a matter of urgency for them, and the study of the sciences, which they already know, becomes less important in their particular case. This does not mean that he is disparaging the sciences. Al-Ghazali counsels his disciples, stating that knowledge is the easy part, but the real sacrifice is in the action. Knowledge alone will not bring about salvation, it must be followed by action. Al-Ghazali states, and I quote, he supposes that his knowledge alone will be his salvation, and that his deliverance is in it, and that he can do without deeds. And this is the conviction of the philosophers. Unquote. It's a quote from Ayyul Wala, one of his last works. Al-Ghazali says that such knowledge is useless without action. It is analogous to a man who has weapons and does not use it when the lion attacks him. The second principle of Sufi education is the purification of the soul. And that means meditation through dhikr, that is invoking Allah's names, and cultivation of virtues in the soul. This is the essence of Sufi education, and the primary means of the knowledge of Allah, ma'rifah. So the part of action involves the purification of the soul. In the first principle we said it's knowledge and action. Part of that action is the purification of the self. The virtues are embedded in the soul through their habitual practice, so that the moral action flows from the soul naturally and spontaneously. This is how the heart becomes receptive to the true knowledge of Allah. Sufi education involves the cultivation of character and all virtues, whether internal virtue of courage or the external virtue of wealth, should be directed at the knowledge of God. Thus Al-Ghazali urged his disciples to follow their preaching with action. Although Sufism is a means to self-purification, it should not lead to ecstatic utterances. Shataha, so typical of many Sufis. And I quote, O disciple, it is desirable for you that your speech and action be in accord with the law, the Sharia. Since knowledge and action, which are not modeled on the law, are error. And you must not be deceived by the ecstatic expressions and outbursts of the Sufis, since travel on this path should be by way of self-exertion, and severing the ego's appetite and killing his passions with the sword of discipline, and not by way of outbursts and useless statements. Unquote. The third principle of Sufi education is the moral example of the Sufi master. How should the student attain this purification of the soul, or the murid? It is important to have a Sufi sheikh or a spiritual guide to instruct him. As he states in the letter to the disciple, Ayyul Wala, and I quote, the student should have a master and instructor as a guide to rid him of bad traits through his instruction and replace them with good ones. Unquote. The master is analogous to a farmer who removes weeds so that the crops can grow to perfection. Similarly, the master will remove the weeds of immorality from the soul for it to grow to moral perfection. And I need to conclude. I will cut out more quotations and just mention just quickly, what are the three, if you don't mind, 1 minute?
1 minute?
Yeah. What are the three characteristics of the Sufi master? The first is that he should practice asceticism, zuhd. He should detach himself from worldliness. Okay? And little sleep and little food and all that. Second characteristic, he should embody himself with the virtues, such as patience, gratitude, etc., etc., etc. The third characteristic is his veneration for his own master. The third characteristic of the Sufi master, he should respect his own Sufi master, outwardly and inwardly. Outwardly, he should not argue with his master, and he should do the task of the master as far as he can manage. Inwardly, everything he hears and receives from him externally should not be rejected internally, for that would be hypocrisy. Conclusion: the three principles of Sufi education has been extrapolated from Al-Ghazali's Mizan al-Amal and Ayyul al-Walad. The first principle is the balance between knowledge and action. The second principle is the purification of the soul. And the third principle is the moral example of the Sufi master. For Al-Ghazali, the aim of Sufi education is the intuitive knowledge of God, ma'rifah. And this comes about through a light that is cast into the heart of the servant whose soul has been purified. Shukran jazilan. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.